A while back, I went to Starbucks with my coworker. It was a later day at the office, and my coworker Tavish and I were doing a project together. Tavish and I get along well, and we're friends outside of work also. So on this particular evening, we had been working for quite some time. Both of us were really tired and wanted to go home, but we were almost done. We decided to take a short break from finishing work and get some coffee. There's a Starbucks that's literally a 2 or 3 minute walk from the office. So we both went downstairs and then walked over to the Starbucks outside. After getting in the Starbucks, there were a few other people there, but it really wasn't too busy. We went up to the counter and ordered what we wanted. Then we went over and stood around waiting and talking about our work project. Now, I remember that several minutes later, our orders came out. However, Tavish's was not quite correct. Instead of writing Tavish on his cup, they wrote Travis, but also his drink was wrong. After realizing this, he went over and told the employee guy that it was incorrect. Now, I was surprised to see that the employee did not seem happy at all. In fact, he almost appeared to argue with Tavish, as if to say, "No, it's not wrong." I was watching from a ways away and couldn't hear what was being said. I could tell, though, that the employee looked pretty angry. Tavish mostly just looked surprised. Soon, though, I saw another employee come over and start talking to them both. Eventually, Tavish came back over to me with an amused look on his face. He said that the guy got all mad for no reason after he screwed up his order. Apparently, the Starbucks coworker came over and told Tavish that he was right and the other guy would remake it. Tavish said that he thought something had to be wrong with the other employee. Soon, they corrected his drink, and we both left the Starbucks. When we left, I looked over, and the one employee was staring at us looking angry. So we both walked back to work, and then were able to finish. It probably took us almost another hour, but then we were done and able to leave. After exiting the office, it was probably like 9 o'clock at night almost. I remember that we both used to park in this free parking lot that was like a 10-minute walk away from the office. It seems a long ways, but parking close by was so expensive that it was worth it. So we had to walk right past the Starbucks again, and when we saw it, I jokingly made a comment that we can't go back there now. But just as I said that, I literally saw the guy who worked there and was mad leaving the building. Then he stepped out onto the sidewalk and seemed to notice us. He then stopped to the side of the door. We had to walk right past him, and both just ignored him and looked in another direction. But after moving past, the man actually started following us. He walked the same way that we were going on the sidewalk. We were both immediately suspicious because it was like he had waited for us. After walking to the end of the block, we turned. The guy turned as well. We both decided that we were going to take a random turn at the next street and see what the guy behind us would do. When we did, he did the exact same thing as well. At that point, I remember that Tavish stopped, turned around, and called out to the man. He asked him why he was following us. The guy just ignored him. He stood there just looking at us but not saying anything. We then kept walking. When we did, the guy did the same. We went faster and quickly walked all the way back to the parking lot. By the time we got there, the man was still following. We went faster and the guy just stopped on the edge of the parking lot. I went to my car and Tavish went to his. The guy followed neither of us. Instead, he stood near the exit and just kept staring in our direction. It was really strange. We both left, driving past him on the way out. He looked at us both as he just stood there with a creepy look on his face. After that, we never went back to that Starbucks. I work at Starbucks. This is something that happened a couple of months ago. So I've been working there for about a year at the time. I often work until close, and I can close the place by myself. That's what I was going to be doing on this night in particular, which was a longer shift. I started work at 1 and got off when we closed at 8:30. Usually, things really didn't get too busy other than a few hours in the morning. So on this day, I never really dealt with a big rush of customers. After 7 p.m., things got especially quiet. The place was completely empty other than somebody coming in here and there. It was just me and one other coworker. At about 8 o'clock p.m., roughly 30 minutes before we closed, a man walked in. He was a little bit bigger guy, maybe in his mid-40s, and approached the counter. I walked over and asked what he would like. The man just asked me what time we closed, and I said 8:30. Then he just turned around and walked out of the place. I found this to be really strange, but whatever, I thought. After the man left, nobody else came in. At probably like 8:15 or so, my other coworker left, and I started cleaning some things and putting stuff away. Then, at literally 8:30 on the dot, I was about to walk over and lock the doors. But before I went over there, the front door opened up. The same man from earlier walked inside. I had a bad feeling. He knew that we closed at 8:30. I had literally told him myself. So I felt like he was either coming here now just to try to make me mad or something else. I went back behind the counter and I told the guy that we had just closed. He did not say anything to me. Instead, he kept approaching. The man walked all the way over to me at the counter, but then went to the side and then walked around it. He was starting to come behind the counter where only employees were allowed, and I told him that he was not supposed to be back here, but he still didn't listen. I could see that he was still coming towards me, and I quickly went to the side. I then hopped onto the counter and crawled over it as quickly as I could. After making it to the other side, I just sprinted for the door. But when I saw that the man was now back around the counter and running for me, I changed my direction and instead went for the bathrooms. I was able to make it there and go inside before the guy reached me. These bathrooms had a full locking door, so after getting in and locking it, the man could not get inside. He arrived at the door probably 5 seconds later. I asked the guy what he wanted from the other side. His only response was demanding me to open the door. I had my phone and I took it out and dialed 911. I told the man that I was calling the police, hoping that it would make him go away. This did not immediately work though. The man walked away at first, only to return and pound on the door. I told the 911 dispatcher everything that was going on. The man then seemed to go over and grab a chair or something and slam it against the door. I was terrified. The man banged on the door several more times. Eventually, though, I heard his footsteps moving towards the front door of the building, and moments later, heard it opening. I did not leave the bathrooms, though, thinking maybe he was just pretending to leave. I didn't hear any more noises, though, until the cops got there. When they did, I finally left. I told them what happened, and they said they would look around. One officer stayed with me, asking more questions. In the meantime, another officer went to look around. Surprisingly, they found the man walking in a nearby parking lot. He was picked up for the incident, and I had to fill out a report. Then I was able to finally go home about an hour later. That was by far the craziest thing that's ever happened to me working here. This is something that happened back when I was in college. It was about 5 years ago now. So this particular year, I lived in a house just off of campus. I had 2 roommates, and the 3 of us were all real good friends. The house was small, but pretty typical for college kids. I had a class with one of my roommates, Jeremy. So for this class, we would occasionally go places to study. It was pretty difficult, and one time, we had a big project, so we walked to a Starbucks a little ways from campus. When we got there, it was pretty busy, but we were lucky to be able to find a table that was open. Then we took out our laptops and notes and started studying. I remember that probably about 2 hours went by, and we were really grinding on the work. At one point, Jeremy leaned over to me and said that there was a woman staring at me. I looked around, and it did not take me long before I noticed her. She was sitting on the other side of the crowded Starbucks by herself at a table. She was in fact staring at what appeared to be right at me, but not in a good way. She was basically glaring at me like she was really angry. I did not know who this woman was. I had never seen her before. I looked away and told Jeremy that I had no idea who she was. We both agreed that it was really weird. I looked over at her several more times in the next few minutes. She wasn't staring at me every time, but I caught her doing so at least 3 other times. I didn't know what to do, so I just tried to ignore it. A little more time went by, and the Starbucks got quieter as some people left. I remember that I happened to look up and see the woman staring at me again, but then a short time later, she got up. The woman walked over to another table that was closer to ours. Then she sat down there and continued staring at me. It was really creeping me out. So after like 5 more minutes and realizing that she was still staring, I said to Jeremy that we should go. We had got a lot done and it was getting late anyways. So we packed up our stuff and then we headed out of the Starbucks. By this time, it was completely dark out. After leaving, I remember looking back to make sure that the woman wasn't leaving as well. I saw her still sitting in the same place and looking out of the window at me. I looked away and we started walking back. It took us maybe 10 minutes to walk back to our house from there. So after arriving back, we both went inside and I went to my bedroom to take my stuff out of my backpack. I remember when I was doing this, I heard Jeremy call my name from the living room. I went out and Jeremy said that she was back. I instantly knew who he was talking about. I looked out the front window and saw the same woman walking up towards the front step. But she didn't go to the front door. She just stopped, maybe 20 feet in front of the front step, still in the yard. Then she appeared to just stare at our front door. She looked over to the window and we quickly ducked down. We were so creeped out by this. The woman stayed there, just standing in the yard and staring at us. We debated calling the cops. However, after maybe 5 minutes, the woman finally turned around and walked away. We both looked out the window a bunch more times that night to make sure that she didn't return, and luckily she didn't. After that, we avoided that Starbucks for a while. I did eventually go back though, and never saw the woman again. I think it's really weird what happened. I still don't know who she was or why she kept staring at me. It was really strange though. I used to work at Starbucks several years ago. This was the creepiest thing that ever happened to me when I worked there. I was closing one night after a really busy day, and I stayed back to clean. All the other employees had left, and we had customers inside almost all night right up until we closed. So because of that, I had a few things to do before I could leave. This Starbucks location is also one of the larger ones, I would say. So I started by doing some sweeping and picking up trash around the place. It wasn't too bad, but it definitely needed to be cleaned. Then I was straightening up things like the chairs that were out of place. So I came to this corner which had a larger table. All of a sudden, I noticed that there was a man hiding underneath it. I couldn't believe when I saw him. It was really hard to notice him unless you got close. I jumped back, and the man then looked at me, but did not get up. After staring at him for a few moments in shock, I finally spoke. I told the man that we were closed and he had to leave. The man did not say anything. I asked him what he was doing. The man got out from the table and quickly ran over to the door and left. When I saw it, I was in disbelief, but I was also very glad that he was now gone. The doors were locked already, so I instantly felt 100 times safer. At that point, I just kind of thought, whatever, and then I went back to what I was doing. I spent about 10 more minutes doing tasks, then was finally able to leave. I got my stuff and headed out to the front door. After walking out, I was going to my car in the parking lot, which was the only one still there. In front of my car, there was a grassy area with a few trees. I noticed that the man was sort of behind my car in that grass area. My heart sank when I saw him. I didn't want to go by him, but as I started to approach, he stood up and looked at me. I stopped. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. I asked the man what he was doing, but he didn't answer me. I asked if he could leave, saying that was my car. He moved, but only to go to the other side of the car. The man then spoke, saying that he really needed to use my vehicle. Obviously, I wasn't going to let him. He told me that his had broken down and some other stuff. I can't remember exactly what. I told him that he would have to ask somebody else though. The man yelled back at me saying no. I told him then that if he didn't leave, I was going to call the police on him. The man screamed back, telling me to go ahead. I dialed 911 and moved closer to the Starbucks. When somebody answered, I started to say what was going on. During the call, though, I noticed the man run off to behind the trees. When I saw this, I just started sprinting for my car. I wanted to get there before the man changed his mind and went back to my car again. I was hoping he wouldn't do that, but I didn't know for sure. I was able to make it and safely get inside. I started the engine, and when I did, I saw the man re-emerging from the woods. He was also headed towards me and holding a large stick. I backed out and drove off as fast as I could. The man was not able to get to me. After driving off, I explained to 911 what had just happened. They said they would send an officer to the Starbucks to see if the guy was still there. I then went home. After that, I never saw the guy at the Starbucks again. I still get creeped out thinking back to that night. One time, I went to Starbucks to get some coffee on my way to work. This isn't something that I usually did. However, I was really craving a coffee on this particular day and also wanted the caffeine. On the way to my job, I went to the Starbucks and parked and then went inside. It was somewhat busy like any coffee place is in the morning. So I got in line and eventually ordered and got my coffee. I was inside for probably like 5 minutes or so. After leaving the Starbucks, I was walking through the parking lot to get back to my car. There were several businesses in the same parking lot, so I had parked around the corner sort of in the back where there were some open spaces. When I got out there, I went inside of my car. However, after starting the engine, before I could back up, an SUV came driving by. But it stopped right behind my car, completely blocking me in the spot. I didn't know why this guy stopped there, because there weren't really any other cars around. I waited, thinking that he was probably going to move soon, but after at least 30 seconds, the car was still there. I honked my horn, and still nothing happened. After a little bit more time, I was about to get out of my car when I saw the back door to the SUV opening. A man got out, and then I noticed that another man was also getting out on the other side. These guys both started approaching my car. I wanted to leave, but couldn't. One man went to each side of my car. They approached the front, and one guy went to my driver's door while the other went to my passenger's. Then they tried entering. My doors were locked, and the men then started banging on the windows. I asked them what they were doing, but they just told me to open the doors. Now, these guys were not cops or anything, so obviously I was not going to open the doors for them. When they continued to try to open the doors and were banging on them, I started honking my horn. I didn't know what else to do. This continued with the men banging on my doors and windows and me honking my horn for probably almost a minute straight, but it felt like much longer. Then, finally, the men stopped and walked back to the SUV. Then they got back inside and drove away. I was very confused as to what had just happened. I then dialed 911 to report the event. After that, I had to be on my way and get to work. I still don't know what happened there. My guess is that it was an attempted carjacking. However, I don't know why they chose me. It seems so random, and it's not like it was at night or anything. It was right in the morning. I'm really grateful that they eventually left me alone.